Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of the series of videos in which I am talking about how to implement the dependency injection design pattern in C# and JavaScript programming languages. So this is part 2, and in part 1 I have explained the basic concepts. So if you have not watched the part 1 yet, then I would highly advise you to do that, because that would set up the groundwork for you to understand how the dependency injection design pattern works. But if you think that you already know about the basic stuff and you know how this pattern works and you are just here to watch the code sample in action, then I guess you can skip the first part and then you can continue to watch this video, in which I will be explaining with a very simple example how DI can be implemented in C#, and hopefully you will be able to understand it. And later, if you have any questions, then feel free to ask me using the comments area, and I will try to respond as much as I can. Before we begin, I would like to request you all to like this video and to subscribe to this channel if you think that this video is helpful for you. It will really help this channel to grow and for the videos to reach to a larger audience. So without wasting any more time, let's get on to the code example. So this is a C# console application, and you can actually create any type of project or application to implement the dependency injection design pattern. I am using console application because it is the simplest to create and to work with when we are just learning basic concepts or such kind of design patterns in C#. For this code example, I'm going to create a person class, and then I will write code to save that person class onto the file system. Later, I will convert that code to use the dependency injection design pattern so that we can use several different services for our client. So first, I'm just going to list down these steps which we are going to perform. The first one is create the person class and then save the person information. So now let's get on to do that. Let's create the person class. So class person, and then let's add some properties to it. Let's add public string first name, and then similar to first name, let's also add last name. Now to write the functionality to save this person information somewhere, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method. So let's do that. Void save person, and this will accept the argument of type person. And then, you know what, I'm not actually going to write the code to save the person information because that is beyond the point and the scope of this video and code example. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to write some comment over here like save person information. Now to actually save the person info using this method, we simply first need to create a new object for our person, and let's just do that. So first name, let's provide some values for the first name and last name. Alright, so let's call this function save person. Actually, what we need to do is we need to convert this into a static so that we will be able to use it from the main method. So static void save person, and then let's provide the person object as an argument. So this is the standard way of doing things. Now for this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this piece of code into a setup which is going to use the objects for a client and a number of different services to be able to save the information of this person into different places. So let's now create classes for the client and services for this person. The client is going to be called as person manager. So this person manager can do a lot of different things for the person object, but for this example, this person data manager is going to be limited to only saving the person information using the service which we are going to inject into this person manager class using the dependency injection design pattern, and you will see shortly how this can be done. So This is the person manager class, but before we do anything else over here, let's also create a person data manager. So this person data manager's job is to provide the functionality to actually save the person information, and this is a service which is going to be used by this person manager class, which is acting as a client. And to save the person's information in different places, we are going to need several different data manager classes. Like for example, if we want to save the person information in a text file, then we are going to need a class to save in a text file. Similarly, we can have more classes which will act as services. So this can be for XML file, and this class can be for SQL database. So the meaning of all of this is that we will be able to switch these services which we are going to inject in this person manager class. Actually, I'm not really sure if you guys can see it. I can zoom it more, but maybe it's too much. You know what, let's just keep on using the original zoom level. So anyways, these are different services which we are going to use, but in order to use them for the dependency injection design pattern, the first and foremost thing which we need is an interface. Now an interface acts as a binding contract which will provide the common functionality for all of these different person data manager classes. So whenever we are working in C#, to use dependency injection, we will need to have interfaces for all of the services which we are going to inject into the client, because without interfaces we will not be able to switch between different services. And I will show you how in a moment how this actually works. So let's first create an interface, and let's call it person data manager, and this interface is going to provide the common functionality of saving the person information. So void save person, this will accept an argument of type person, and now all of these data manager classes for persons are going to be inherited from this interface person data manager. And we also need to provide the implementation of the save person method. So void save person. Now we are not actually going to write the code to save the person to a text file. We just need to do something so that we will know that this method is being called. And for that, what I will do is I will simply write something to the console so that we will know that this class or this object is being used. So person details, my English is bad, are saved to a text file. All right, so this is still a red line, and what it is saying is person that manager text file does not implement interface member this because it is not public. All right, yeah, that's an important piece of information that I just forgot, because all of the interface methods which are defined need to be public, they cannot be private. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste them over here, and for this class this can be XML file and this can be a SQL DB. So whenever we will see these messages written on the console, then we will know which service is currently being used. Now our work for the person data manager is done, and it is a good practice to always enclose our code which belongs to the same category in a region. So I'm going to do that. Person data manager, let's cut this from over here, and there you go. Now it's time to implement the code for our client, which is the person manager. So the first thing which we need over here is the private field or the private member for the person. So person underscore person, and then we will also need the private I person data manager. Let's call it, you know what, let's call it underscore person data manager. Let's maintain the standard. Okay, now we will need a constructor. So public person manager, and this is going to accept the arguments for the person object, and we will also need the I person data manager. I'm just going to copy from over here, and now in the code I'm just going to assign the private fields with the arguments which are being passed into the constructor. So underscore person, and then similarly person data manager equals to the person data manager. So that sets things up. Now to use this person manager to first inject a service into it and then use this person manager to save a person, we will first also need to create a similar function to save the person information like this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call it public void save person, and this time this is not going to accept any argument because we already have a person with us. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to call the person data manager interfaces save person method, and then I'm going to supply this person as an argument, and that's pretty much it. Now we need to modify our code over here. I'm just going to comment out this one, and then so now what we need to do is we need to create an object for the person manager client, and then we will need to create an object for the person data manager service. After that we will inject the person and the person data manager service into the person manager client, and then we will use person manager's save person to actually save the person information. So first things first, let's create the person data manager client. Let's call it person data manager equals to new. Now we are not going to create the concrete object from the interface. We need to use one of the implementing classes which we created over here. I'm just going to use the person data manager text file for now, and for the person manager client, person manager equals to new person manager. We will need to provide the arguments for the person which is already there, which we created before, and then the person data manager. And now it's time to save the person, so save the person info, and we can do that by calling person manager dot save person, and that's how we can save the person information. Now let's run the code and see if our code is working fine or not. I'm just going to build it first. Okay, so the code has been built. Now let's run it. So I'm also going to add another line over here to, let's just do that to see the output. So console dot read line. Now let's build it again and then run it again. So the message which is printed is person details are saved to a text file. Now if we were to use a different service for our person data manager client, we can do that by simply replacing this class. We can continue to use the XML file data manager instead of a text file data manager. Build the code, run it. Now the message is different. The person details are saved to a XML file. We can do similar thing with the the person data manager SQL DB, and we will see these similar results. So this is how dependency injection actually works. We are switching the service which is being used by this person manager client, and the person manager client is not responsible to have its own code for this functionality. This functionality is being injected into it, and this functionality, which is a service, can be switched based on our requirement into a different service. Now This code is dependency injection design pattern, but this is not a complete one, because to change the service which is being used over here and which is being injected into this client, we need to always make a code change. And a code change simply means that we will need to rebuild our application and then redeploy it on the production server, which is kind of hectic and so much time consuming, because there are so many different steps are involved. There are so many people involved in this entire process. There are developers and testers and business analysts, etc. So we don't really have to do that. This should not be the way to use this design pattern. So what we are going to do is we are going to read the type of service which we need to use from a configuration file, and then we will create the object for the service, which is the person data manager, and then we will inject it. We will not hard code it into this program.cs file. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the app.config file. If you don't have this app.config, then you can add it into your solution. And you will also need to have the reference added for system.configuration if you want to interact with this configuration file. So what I will do is I will add another element in this app settings section, and let's name it person data manager type, and we will also need to provide a value. For now I'm just going to provide the value of the person data manager text file. So our key has been added. Now it's time to read this value from this key and then keep on using this value instead of hard coding the type of service which we are using. For that we will need to write additional code, and we will also need to use a reflection. So you will need to add its using statement, the using system.reflection into your file. So let's now read the type of person data manager which we need to use, and to do that I'm just going to first create a string type which is person data manager type string. So configuration manager, where is it, dot app settings. And now we can read the value of this key which we have added to the app settings, and I'm just going to provide the name for the key, which is person data manager type. And that's pretty much it to read the string value. Now we need to create an object from this string value, and for that I'm going to create a new type. Let's name it person data manager type equals to type dot get type. So let's just get the type of the person data manager class. So string dot format, and so we will need to provide the name of the class along with the namespace in which this class resides. So for that the namespace name is actually di, which is short for dependency injection, and di dot the name of the class. This token is for the name of the class which we are going to use, and for the argument we are going to use this person data manager type string. And that's pretty much it to get the type of the data manager class which we need to create. So now to create the person data manager, what I'm going to do is, let's just comment out this piece of code, and then person data manager equals to activator dot create instance, and we are going to create an instance from this type, the person data manager type, and then we also need to typecast it into this I person data manager in order to use it. And there you go. I'm just going to keep this line of code. Now the rest of the code will work as usual, and then we can build this code and see if it's working correctly or not. So person details are saved to a text file. Now in order to use a different service, what we simply need to do is we need to replace the type which is in this value. the person data manager XML file. Now we don't need to rebuild the code, we just need to run it again, and then the code will now start using the XML file data manager. Similarly, we can replace it with a different service. Do not build it, just run it, and then the message is for the SQL DB. So this is how we can switch the service which is being injected into the client without making any single line of code change, and this saves a lot of time. Whenever a requirement arises for any of our project to switch between different services, then we don't have to make a code change and then redeploy it to the production server, because any code change means that the code will need to be tested, or at least a regression has to be done on the code which is being deployed on the production. It saves a lot of time too, and in any organization, time almost always equals money. So we are also going to save a lot of money, because we are not going to waste our time and resources on the processes which can be completely removed because of using this dependency injection design pattern. So what now? This is the type of injection which is called as constructor injection, because we are actually injecting the service type in a constructor. There are other ways to do it, and I'm just going to list them down and then show you how they work. The first one which I'm going to show you is property injection, and then I will show you the setter function injection, and then I will also show you a way for injecting which is not, I don't know if it's being used anywhere or not, but still it is something which I think you should know about. So interface injection. Okay, so for property injection, what we need to do is we need to create a property in our person data manager client, and that property is for the person data manager, actually for the person manager client, I'm sorry. So to create the property, I'm just going to create one over here. Let's just comment out this piece of code, the person data manager, and also let's create another constructor, because we will not be injecting the value for the person data manager from this constructor. So I'm just going to comment out this one too. So I'm sorry, public person manager, but we will need person object still, so I'm just going to have it as an argument. So public person manager, and then inside this constructor let's have the usual stuff, set person, and then when we are using this client, what we need to do is we need to use the other constructor, and let's now call this constructor first. So equals to new person manager, and to set the service which will be used by this person manager, what we need to do is we need to set the property value for the person data manager equals to this person data manager, and that's pretty much it. And I'm just going to place the comment over here, property injection, and then whenever this save person will be called, then the code should work as usual. Now let's build it and run it. So the code is still working, and this time we are not injecting the service into a constructor, we are actually setting a property to set the service which is being used by this client. The next one is the setter function injection, and it is also pretty straightforward. We are just going to add a function in this person manager class, and I'm just going to add the function over here. So the name of the function is set person data manager, and this function will accept the argument for the service, and then the service will be set into the private field. And for this purpose, let's just comment out this one, and let's uncomment this one. So it's time to use the setter function injection. To do that, we are going to create the person manager in the same way, but now instead of setting a property, we are going to call this person set person data manager, and then we will provide this person data manager as an argument. So this is the setter function injection. We are using a setter function to set the type of the service which is being used by this client. Let's build it and run it. It's again running fine. The last one is interface injection, which is kind of complicated if you are not really well versed with the object oriented programming concepts, but nevertheless it will not hurt me to teach you guys about this one too. So for this to work, we will need another interface, and I am just going to call it, let's say, I person data, or I person manager injector. Now this interface is going to have a function definition to set the service for our client. Let's call it set person data manager object. Now we are going to inherit the implementation details from this I person manager injector for this person manager, and this error is because we have not provided a description of this definition. So let's just do that. I'm just going to copy this one. Actually this method is pretty much same like this one, so I'm just going to rename it. So this method is for the interface injection. Now to use it, what we need to do is we just need to create the person manager in the usual way, and then we will need to call the person managers function, which is provided by the interface set person data manager object, and that's pretty much it. So things are not really this simple when we are using dependency injection. There needs to be a lot of validation and data checking before we actually use the services, but to understand this design pattern in a simple way, I think this example is going to be enough for you guys. Maybe it is too complicated for some of you, but if it is, then feel free to ask me any questions that you might have about this entire thing, and I am going to share this code on GitHub so that you can play with it or change it, modify it, do whatever with it. I don't really care as long as you are learning this awesome design pattern. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys, and I hope that you have understood what I am trying to explain over here. I know that this design pattern is not easy to understand, and what I have seen is people frequently misunderstood this one with the factory design pattern. They think that dependency injection is factory, but it is not. There is a clear distinction between those two design patterns. In factory, we always need to supply the identifying information of the object which we need to fetch from the factory class. Nothing of that sort happens in dependency injection, so that is a clear distinction. I don't know why still some people get confused between those two design patterns, as is evident from my the previous video on dependency injection which I created. But nevertheless, learning is a continuous process and making mistakes is not a bad thing. So on that note, I am going to take my leave, and then I will see you in the next video, which will be about implementing the dependency injection design pattern in JavaScript code. So let's see how things turn out in JavaScript. So as I mentioned before, if you like this video, then feel free to like it and subscribe to this channel, and you will be always the first to know about the new video updates. So I will see you in the next one. Till then, have a great day.